In the heart of Southeast Asia is Vietnam, a nation buzzing with economic vitality. With their booming factories and a youthful population, the country's become the go-to destination for manufacturing excellence, as well as a magnet for foreign investment. Today, Vietnam is one of the fastest-growing and most resilient economies in the world. But this was not always the case. In fact, about 40 years ago, the country was one of the poorest in the world. So how did this Southeast Asian nation grow to become such an economic spectacle? The sudden rise of Vietnam. According to history, when the 20-year Vietnam War ended in 1975, Vietnam's economy was one of the poorest in the world, and growth under the government's subsequent 5-year central plans was failing. By the mid-1980s, per capita GDP was stuck between $200 and $300. But then something changed. In 1986, the government introduced Doi Moi, a series of economic and political reforms, and steered the country to becoming a socialist-oriented market economy. Today, Vietnam is one of the stars of the emerging markets universe, with its economic growth rivaling that of China, and its exports being worth as much as the total value of its GDP. So how'd this miracle happen? According to analysts from the World Bank, Vietnam's economic rise can be explained by three main factors. First, it embraced trade liberalization with gusto. Second, it has complemented external liberalization with domestic reforms through deregulation and lowering the cost of doing business. Finally, Vietnam has invested heavily in human and physical capital, predominantly through public investments. Regarding the first factor, we can point to the various free trade agreements the country signed in the last 20 years. In 1995, Vietnam joined the Asian Free Trade Area. In 2000, it signed a free trade agreement with the U.S., and in 2007, it joined the World Trade Organization. Since then, further ASEAN agreements followed with China, India, Japan, and Korea. The cumulative effect of all these agreements was to gradually lower the tariffs imposed both on imports and exports to and from Vietnam. Also, Vietnam invested a lot in its human capital. This was necessary as a growing population also means a growing need for jobs. But Vietnam invested heavily in infrastructure as well, ensuring cheap mass access to the internet. Those investments no doubt paid off. Armed with the necessary infrastructure and with market-friendly policies in place, Vietnam soon became a hub for foreign investment in manufacturing in Southeast Asia. Japanese and Korean electronics companies like Samsung, LG, Olympus, and Pioneer, and countless European and American apparel makers began to set up shop in the country. By 2017, Vietnam was the largest exporter of clothing in the region and the second largest exporter of electronics after Singapore. Vietnam today. Thanks to its solid foundations, the economy has proven resilient through difficult crises. Economic growth is projected to reach 5.5% in 2024, up from 5% in 2023, driven by increasing global demand and restored domestic consumer confidence. Also, real GDP growth is expected to strengthen in the next 3 years, reaching the pre-pandemic average by 2026. This is expected because of the improvement in individual sectors in the country. For instance, with the agricultural sector growing at 2.5% to 3.5% per year over the past 3 decades, it has supported economic growth and ensured food security, contributing to GDP and the employment rate in the country. Health outcomes have also improved along with rising living standards. For example, infant mortality rates fell from 32.6% per 1,000 live births in 1993 to 16.7% in 2020. And life expectancy rose from 70.5 to 75.5 years between 1990 and 2020. Interestingly, Vietnam's universal health coverage index is higher than regional and global averages, with 87% of the population covered by the National Health Insurance Scheme. Considering the educational sector, Vietnam's average duration of schooling is 10.2 years, second only to Singapore among the Association of Southeast Asian Nations countries. And its human capital index is 0.69 out of a maximum of 1, making it the highest among the low-income economies. Also, access to infrastructure service has increased dramatically. As of 2019, 99.4% of the population used electricity as their main source of lighting, up from just 14% in 1993. Access to clean water in rural areas has also improved, up from just 17% in 1993 to a whopping 51% in 2020. It's equally worthy of note that Vietnam has grown bolder in its development aspirations, aiming to become a high-income country by 2045. But to achieve this goal, the economy would have to grow at an annual average rate of about 6% per capita for the next 25 years. Challenges loom. Despite the promising picture painted by GDP growth, Vietnam still faces many challenges, both from internal and external factors. On one side, the slowdown of the global economy, the prolonged effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, and the ongoing escalation of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine are having negative impacts on the Vietnamese economy. Also weighing on the country's development is persistently high inflation, causing many central banks to tighten monetary policies and hike rates. The equity market concluded 2022 down 32.78%, its worst performance since the 2008 financial crisis. Negative issues linked with the property market have also surfaced, with policy-driven crackdowns leading to heightened risk. Interestingly, while problems in the property market are a cause for concern, policymakers are more interested in the knock-on effects it's having on the country's banking sector. According to them, the banking sector's exposure to the property market is a little on the high side, even though it's not terribly high. For instance, among the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, on the high end, you have Singapore and Malaysia, where about half the loan portfolio is exposed to the property market. And on the low end, you have Indonesia, the Philippines, and Thailand, which are in the low 20s. Vietnam's just over 30%, and so even though Vietnam's banking sector is resilient, it's grappling with weak asset quality. In addition to this, a few megatrends are also shaping the future of the country. For instance, Vietnam's population is rapidly aging and global trade's declining. Environmental degradation, climate change, and the rise of automation are growing. Coupled with the impacts of the COVID-19 crisis, Vietnam is faced with unprecedented challenges that can undermine progress towards its development goals. Is there hope for Vietnam? To rise above these challenges, Vietnam needs to dramatically improve its performance to implement policies, particularly in finance, environment, digital transformation, social protection, and low-carbon infrastructure. Adapting to climate impacts and pursuing a growth strategy that steers the economy away from carbon-intensive production will help the country achieve its climate objectives while expanding its GDP per capita by around 6% a year, and that'd go a long way in helping it achieve its goal to become a high-income country by 2045. Vietnam's economic rise may be filled with turbulence, but the overall trajectory remains upward. From all indications, the country seems focused on overcoming its challenges in its strive towards a sustainable and green future. As the country pushes through the murk of its history towards a bright future, the Southeast Asian tiger is gradually becoming a contender in the global trade market. However, they also face dynamic challenges due to the rapidly shifting climate and global trade dynamics. To continue their meteoric rise, they need to embrace digital innovation while strengthening social protections and switching to greener, low-carbon infrastructure. Do you think Vietnam will be able to survive amongst big players like China, Japan, Russia, or even the United States of America? Share your thoughts in the comments section, and don't forget to like this video.